Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well today. This time we are going to be talking about Heavy Barrel on the NES. Heavy Barrel has a very simple story. Terrorists have taken over a nuclear missile base, and it's your job to kill the terrorist leader. That was all you needed to know in the arcades. I always find this story funny. Terrorists are threatening the world. The government's solution is to send in two soldiers, or one if you're playing one player, and they just kind of assume that there are going to be weapons along the way that you can pick up. And then they go in guns blazing. No secrecy whatsoever. Just go in there, shoot everyone, do what you need to do. You don't expect much from a story from a video game in the 1980s, but it's fun to point out how absurd these stories can be sometimes. They weren't important, but they are kind of funny. There are a few things that Heavy Barrel had in order to help it stand out. This is just a simple top-down run-and-gun shooter that's similar to Commando, Akari Warriors, and Mercs. Unlike Commando and Akari Warriors, though, this doesn't lock your screen, so you don't have to keep moving up in order to advance the screen. You can scroll pretty much anywhere as long as there's not a boundary. And in some cases, it's pretty good to backtrack to find some of your power-ups that you may have missed. So the power-up system is pretty unique in this. All of the power-ups are in locked boxes, and in order to get them out, you need to kill specific enemies in order to get keys. The enemies that have these keys are all red, so they stand out from all the others. And yeah, it's kind of fun to grab a key and then head back a little ways to find a lockbox that has the right power-up that you want. Because when you first open them up, I couldn't tell what the power-ups actually were. Some were weapons, some were grenades, some were grenade upgrades, and it's kind of a crapshoot on what you're really getting. These upgraded weapons have a limit on them, so you can get a flamethrower, but you only have a certain number of attacks. You can get a spread gun, but again, only a certain number of attacks. That's the only thing that I don't like about the power-up system. Other than that, it's pretty good. Like many other arcade games, you have a limited number of continues, which is kind of a problem. You also only have 3 lives. But yeah, there are a few things that I would have added into this, like a password save system that's lacking, and also unlimited continues. It just would have made it a better port for the NES if they had done those things. Thankfully, your bullets travel farther than the enemy's bullets, so you don't have the same problem that you have in Akari Warriors, where the enemies can shoot all the way across the screen, but yours stop after like 6 feet or something like that. Also, the controls in this game are a little wonky at times. And that's because they're trying to take an 8-way joystick and move it into a 4-direction D-pad. It does create some issues when you're trying to line up shots with the smaller enemies, but when it comes to the bigger bosses, it's still pretty easy to do. You don't have to worry too much about what's going on. I just wanted to mention that here because it can be an issue at times, but it's not a huge issue. I think the port on the NES looks pretty good. It did take a visual hit from the arcade game, but overall, it looks pretty good for an NES game at this time. It looks better than Akari Warriors and Commando, in my opinion. But yeah, when you look at the arcade version and then compare it to the NES port, there is a bit of a visual hit. Enemy weak points are pretty easy to see, and also the enemies that are holding the keys that you need for the power-ups are easy to see as well. So that's really great. Also, the enemy shots or enemy bullets are pretty easy to see, and, well, not really easy to avoid, but at least it doesn't make it feel cheap. Some examples of kind of cheap gameplay would be 1942, even though I love the game, those shots can get hidden in the background, so they're harder to really dodge and know that they're there. And also, you do have Akari Warriors, where some of the things that you're supposed to avoid are not exactly as clear. So stuff that you can walk through isn't as well defined as it could be. With Heavy Barrel, you know exactly where you're going. You don't end up getting trapped in certain spots, or at least I didn't. You can tell what you need to shoot on the enemies, especially the bosses, and everything just kind of feels like it's supposed to be there. There's no real cheap gameplay, and the graphics don't create problems where I would say that the game screwed me over. Every time I died in this, I felt like it was my fault. I think the game has pretty good graphics for the time period, and also when I compared it to other top-down run-and-gun shooters like this, I think Heavy Barrel looked the best out of the few that I've played. The levels are pretty short, so it doesn't feel like you're going on forever like it did in Akari Warriors, and it feels pretty easy to play. You can just jump right into it. You don't need to know a whole lot about what's going on, and yeah, that's pretty good for a game like this, and it's what you would expect from something on the NES. The bad things are no password saves, so the game is expecting you to just go through it in one shot. Well, it's not a long game. That is kind of annoying for me because I would have liked to have picked up M1 level or something like that. I couldn't find out if there is a level skip code either, so that might be another problem for some people. Having limited continues was annoying. It does force you to get better at the game as you play, but it's one of those things where I feel like it really shouldn't exist in an NES game. You should be able to just keep playing for as long as you want. And that is me looking back at this with a more modern mindset, because if I asked, I don't know, 6 to 10-year-old me, that kid wouldn't have cared about limited continues. He would have just kept playing it until he got bored and went outside. But going back and playing it now, yeah, I wish there were unlimited continues. The controls can be a little frustrating, but that's just a product of taking a control scheme from the arcade and trying to fit it into the NES controller. It's a problem, but it's not a fatal flaw or anything like that. Overall, I think the game's pretty great. I really enjoyed playing it, and yeah, I have a lot more likes than I do dislikes, and the dislikes I have are not anything major. For me, I feel that Heavy Barrel is a hidden gem. It's a game that I didn't know a whole lot about before picking it up and playing it. I didn't know a whole lot about the gameplay, didn't know what the gameplay even really looked like. I had only heard the name Heavy Barrel before. I had seen it on someone else's Hidden Gems video or their top 10 NES games or something like that, but I had never experienced the game. And then sitting down and playing it, I realized, hey, it's a lot of fun. This is something I didn't know about before, so hey, it's probably a hidden gem for me. I had the same feeling when I went back and played Stinger for the first time. I didn't know too much about that game, didn't really know it existed until I started collecting in really the mid 2010s. So yeah, that was a hidden gem for me as well. And yeah, I feel like that term of a game being a hidden gem is kind of lost its meaning for as the internet's gone on, just because it gets thrown around so much. But I feel like that's kind of more of a personal thing. If you didn't know about a game prior to playing it, then that game could potentially be a hidden gem for you. And that's sort of how I feel with Heavy Barrel. I didn't know a whole lot about it before. After playing it, I feel like it's a hidden gem. It's a game that I didn't play as a kid. Now that I played it, I really like it. It's always fun to find one of these games that you either slept on or bought and then didn't really spend enough time with, or just tested it out and stuck it on a shelf and forgot about it for a while. That's what I did with a whole bunch of games, especially when I was collecting them in the late 90s, and then again in the 2000s, and again in the 2010s. I'm starting to realize just how many times I've started and stopped collecting games over the years. It's it's a little weird. Just looking at what I picked up and then trying to remember why I picked it up. Because I've passed the point where I've just been buying the games that I'm nostalgic for. Now I've stopped for the most part, but I was just buying anything that I came across. Anyways, to move along here, Heavy Barrel is a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to see what other libraries have, and just checking out the other games that I haven't paid as much attention to, or kind of passed over, or should probably go back and give a second look to. Anyway, that's going to wrap things up. Let me know what you think in the comments section below, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.